Hello, and presumably welcome back from your weekends. We are going to be devoting our show today to the planned appearance of Robert Mueller, special counsel, before two different congressional committees on Wednesday. He will appear first, I believe, before the House Judiciary Committee, followed by the House Intelligence Committee. The process will consume most of the day. And it's one of the reasons that we're doing our pregame show today. The whole thing starts at 8:30 on Wednesday, so I can't do the wheelhouse. I can't do my show. But that's a small price to pay for democracy, I say. So we're going to talk a little bit about what could be expected out of this and maybe what can't be expected out of it. To do that, we have in studio Bill Curry, Democratic political analyst, former White House counselor to President Bill Clinton, former Democratic nominee for governor of Connecticut, and a columnist for Salon. Joining us by phone is a podcast host who goes by AG, a veteran, PhD, federal government executive, comedian, and executive producer and co-host of the podcast Mueller, She Wrote, which I've been discovering over the last few days and been having a lot of fun listening to. They're also premiering the Daily Beans podcast today. So for more about that, check out their website, Mueller, She Wrote. So before I get into it with my guests, let me just sort of give you the parameters. As I said before, it'll start at 8:30, House Judiciary Committee, break, resume with House Intelligence Committee. Most networks are carrying it or carrying some version of it. Here at Public Radio, we will be carrying all of it all day long. And before our guests speak, the best thing to do would be to let Robert Mueller speak. So Robert Mueller, this is sort of, his version. Let's play A2, Wolfie. This is kind of his version of Seacrest out.
Now, before I step away, I want to thank the attorneys, the FBI agents, the analysts, the professional staff who helped us conduct this investigation in a fair and independent manner. These individuals, who spent nearly 2 years with the special counsel's office, were of the highest integrity. And I will close by reiterating the central allegation of our indictments, that there were multiple, systematic efforts to interfere in our election. And that allegation deserves the attention of every American.
Mueller out. I guess maybe my first question for both of you, I'll start with you, Bill Curry, is, it's pretty clear from everything that Mueller has indicated since then, and amplified by his general distaste for testifying to Congress anyway, that he wants to be done, right? There's no real indication, even though he may be unhappy with the way Attorney General Barr attempted to frame his findings. He may be unhappy with any number of things. There's no real indication that he's going to respond with any sense of eagerness or cooperation tomorrow, or is there?
I would say the only tiny little feather of hope in the last few weeks has been the report that the idea of delaying the hearings a week and his testifying at greater length was his idea. I doubt that it means anything, but I hold out the hope that it means that he himself wishes to take this process somewhat more seriously. Every time in the two modern impeachments, we have three impeachments in the history of this country. In the Nixon and Clinton impeachments, the special prosecutors, Leon Jaworski shared everything he had, named every crime, and put out what has always been called since a roadmap. Ken Starr overshared, practically goaded the Congress into action. What Mueller has done in this sort of sphinx-like attitude that Mueller has done, refusing to name each activity really for what it is, inventing a doctrine that says that he can't list the crimes that have been committed all on his own. He's been the opposite. And one of the problems of this process is that so that you're going into this without what the two previous processes had, a special prosecutor who's willing to finish his own part of the job and give some guidance to the Congress. I see that as a great flaw.
So, AG, you loved this man enough to include him in the title of your podcast, or perhaps you hoped so much for this man that you did that. I suppose it's possible that on Wednesday, after the first couple of questions, he goes, I should have been a lot more clear about this. Like, he totally obstructed justice, all right? I don't know why that didn't come through. I'm really sorry about that. But it's unlikely, right? Everything we've seen about this guy is that he's an institutionalist. He believes in doing things a certain way. He believes he's done things that way. But correct me if you disagree.
No, I agree. I don't think he's going to say anything outside of, the four corners of his report. I mean, I suppose what they could ask is, there are special counsel regulations that indicate that if the Attorney General either disagrees or somehow, finds differently than the special counsel, he is triggered and required to tell Congress about those disagreements or differences. And he did that with his exoneration of the president when he came out with his 4-page summary. And he did that on obstruction, too, when he made the call on obstruction when Mueller didn't. And that, to me, indicates a disagreement or, falls under that rule that would trigger the Attorney General to have to say that to Congress or have to report that to Congress. But again, those questions you probably would just hear Mueller say, I didn't look into that, or that's not, that wasn't within the purview of my report, and so I'm not going to speak to that. I think you'll hear a lot of that.
AG, let me just stay with you for a second on that. That being the case, let's say you're right. What's the reason for the average American to watch or pay attention to what transpires on Wednesday?
Well, so far, the only voices we've had on what's in the Mueller report, outside of Mueller's 9-minute press conference, is the president and the Attorney General. So to have a voice of equal, strength or, loudness in the country of, Robert Mueller, just to come out and say what's in his report, which obviously contradicts what the Attorney General and what the President have said, is very, very important. Just to put it on TV, I'm sure it's going to be blasted across all the news channels. And just that exposure, I think, is what is going to be the most important part of this testimony, even more so maybe than the content.
So let's talk about what kind of questions one could ask. By the way, if you have questions, if you're listening here live, we're live from 1 to 2. If you're hearing this at any other time, don't bother. But our number is 860-275-7266, 860-275-7266. So, Bill Curry, let's imagine that Eric Swalwell calls you up and goes, you know what, I just been binging, Fleabag, and I just haven't really thought of any questions, or I've got nothing.
Well, first I would say I'm not surprised.
All right, okay. Well, it's a great show. He loves it. So,
sure.
Give me something to work with. Give me something to ask. I know that's not how this is really going to work. This is all done with a lot of coordination and a lot of work with staff. But just in my hypothetical universe, what would you tell the hypothetical Eric Swalwell to ask?
Let me say one sentence first and a follow-up to AG, and that is that some of the most interesting and provocative questions may come from the Republicans. And it's if anything, more likely that if they continue their line of disparaging the work of the professionals and of the staff and of politicizing it, they may goad Mueller into saying more than any of the questions we could prepare for the Democrats might elicit from him. I just have a string of questions in no particular order. One, I'd like to know if he ever obtained Trump's tax returns, and if so, did he ever conduct a forensic audit in the time that he had them? I'd like to know who he discussed this extraordinary theory he came up with. We have this. We start with this theory that no president can be prosecuted while in office. Added on to that is the idea that he can't even have a sealed indictment for prosecution later. None of this comes from statutory law or from a Supreme Court ruling. This is all from a departmental memo written by people who depended on the favor of the president they served. And Mueller, all on his own, adds a third codicil to this, which is why one of the principal reason why this was so confusing. He decided that if he wasn't prosecuting him, he couldn't say whether he'd committed multiple felonies or not. And I would want to find out who he talked to about that. If he'd given this any second thought, I would want to draw him out, if only for the public to understand that this was a guy who had made a decision that he couldn't name the crimes before he submitted the report. I'd want to know when and how that happened. I'd also want the staff to say
isn't part
that
of
it's
his
an amazing thing for him to have done on his own, to have just sat there, and invented a new doctrine, whole cloth, that prevented him from doing the job. Even Bill Barr thought he was going to get a recommendation one way or the other. Trump's strongest defenders assumed he had this right, and then they found out at the very last second that he didn't feel he had it.
I thought that part of Mueller's reason, I could have this wrong, the part of Mueller's reason for not doing at least one of the things that you talked about is that he was not in a position to charge, that to make the accusation without any process of then adjudicating that accusation seemed to him unfair. In other words, if I say Bill Curry killed 3 drifters in Abilene, Texas in 1988, but I'm not going to be pursuing this matter, then you don't really have an opportunity to clear your name.
You wouldn't hesitate. But
no, I wouldn't, this is Mueller.
Let me just say, first of all, that's not what Jaworski did. That's not what Starr did. That's not how the system has worked up until Mueller. Mm-hmm. This is a whole new riff. The idea that you can't identify this in language clear enough for people to understand. When you ran that clip at the beginning, he was saying, I'd like to get out of here, but he was also saying, by the way, everybody, this is a huge problem and you all better do something about it. He thinks his job is done. But, as I wrote in Salon, this is a man who's had an extraordinary, diligent, and patriotic life of service, but he botched his last assignment. Part of his job is to put that roadmap, and what that means is to identify this in clearer language. I know he's thinking about precepts that apply normally to how a Justice Department treats a defendant, and what previous prosecutors and most people it never occurred to anyone that this idea even existed, because the stakes here are so different. Because every single American is a stakeholder here. Because the democracy is at stake, because the president has so many ways of defending himself, of even shutting down the system. For that matter, the president can tell a AG that no one can prosecute him under any circumstances. And what are you left with then? Silence? So he just took this way too far. And I wish he was always being complimented for never leaking. I only wish this had leaked, so that he could have heard a little public feedback as to what it was he had in mind.
So, AG, another option, and I think it's an option that I sense it's an option that you like, it's an option that James Comey has also suggested, is that you just ask Mueller questions that elicit damning statements from the report. In other words, did you find that President Trump ordered his counsel to fire Robert Mueller? That if you just walk him through everything that really is in the report, you wind up telling Americans something they don't know.
Yes, that's pretty much it. And honestly, to be, fewer than 3% of Americans have read the report. So most of what Mueller is going to say, I think, are things that the American public doesn't know. But, I agree with the last discussion, too, that, if Swalwell called me up, and he sits both on the Intel and Judiciary committees. He's one of only 3 people, I think. But I would say in the Intel committee questioning, definitely get into what it was, like how he discussed, or how Mueller determined that he was not only not allowed to say that the president committed a crime, but that he couldn't even, go close to saying anything like that. I think that's a very important thing. I also would like for them to discuss, I want for him to discuss the conclusion of his investigation and how that happened, because there were just so many different things around that time that made it seem very rushed, even in some of the court filings from some of the cases that were being handled under the Mueller investigation. A lot of the prosecution that, on Mueller's team were surprised and didn't get their filings in on time because of when the conclusion of the investigation happened. And I'd also like to know about the health of the 14 other investigations that he referred, because they're all seemingly being overseen by William Barr right now. But yes, I think the best way to go about this, instead of asking hypothetical questions such as, if this weren't the president, would you have charged him? I don't think Mueller's going to answer that. But if you get him to spell out, pick one of the obstructive acts, start with one of the acts, asking McGahn to fire the special counsel, for example, and then go through the 3 criteria that Mueller spells out for each thing in order for, under criminal federal law, for it to be a chargeable offense, and ask if those things were present, and then say, ask him according to the rules of federal criminal procedure, would this be a case that you could bring that you could charge for obstruction of justice. And I think that's probably the best backdoor way to get him to say, yes, this act meets the criteria of federal criminal law to charge and obtain and sustain an indictment.
Let me just ask you one more thing, AG, in connection with that. How many things is Mueller likely to reject? How many questions is he likely to reject based on the open and ongoing investigation idea? In other words, there are things that are not in the report, some of them having to do with counterintelligence, with whether or not, the Russians kind of got to Donald Trump and were able to use him to their own ends, things like that. How many of those things is he just not going to talk about because there is an investigation open somewhere else?
Oh yeah, I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty certain that if it touches at all any open and ongoing investigation or any grand jury material for that matter that falls under Rule 60, I don't think he's going to answer any of those questions. Like if they bring up something about Roger Stone and WikiLeaks or Assange, or anything from that case, I don't think he's going to go near it at all. He'll just say, "I'm unable to comment on an open and ongoing investigation," and we've seen other people respond in similar fashion.
All right. I think what I'm going to do here is grab a break. If you guys want to call in, 860-275-7266. You may have questions for our excellent panelists. 860-275-7266. We'll be back after this.
Not what we guessed, and as for the rest, we may never know.
How much, if anything, will America get to see?
I've got those, yay, it's finally over, wait, it's only just beginning, blues. Those damn you, Robert Mueller, thank you for your service, feelings. Those give me that report, now throw this trash in the bin. Congratulations, Hannity, but wait, what'd you win? Those what about obstruction? Here comes Rudy Giuliani. Failings. Those is it really over? Can we still indict Ivanka Blues?
We're back. We're back with our Mueller testimony pregame show. Bill Curry, Democratic political analyst, former White House counselor to Bill Clinton, former Democratic nominee for governor of Connecticut, and columnist for Salon. Joining us by phone, he's in the studio. Joining us by phone, AG, a veteran, PhD, federal government executive comedian, and executive producer and co-host of the podcast Mueller, She Wrote. Add it to your playlist. Also, they're premiering the Daily Beans podcast today as well. So, as we look forward 2 days to this process, Bill, it does seem like, in addition to everything else, this seems like just the worst possible format to get to the bottom of anything. This is going to be 5 minutes Democrat, 5 minutes Republican, 5 minutes Democrat, 5 minutes Republican. It just doesn't seem like, even to get to the kind of clarity AG was talking about some of the things you could at least spell out that are findings of the report. If Mueller goes long on your first question, you might not ask your second question.
I remember watching the Kavanaugh hearings and despairing, wondering if the Democrats in the committee had even had a meeting to divide up the work and discuss how to respond to some of the inevitable attacks from the other side. These hearings have become just performance art. What every member insists most on is their right to have 5 minutes in which to do what the presidential candidates are doing in the primary, just trying to get that one viral moment of play acting. And I'm hoping that they're going to see something better here. I'm not optimistic. Many years ago, when the Senate was conducting racket hearings in the late 1950s, John Kennedy was a member of the committee, and his brother Robert was the committee counsel. Robert became famous, wrote a book, The Enemy Within, because the counsel did all the work. You saw that in Watergate. You saw that in hearing after all the major hearings you can look back to. Think of The Godfather, and just any hearing you've ever seen on TV or in a movie. Now it's done in a way that just breaks down almost any possibility of continuity, of close examination, of following a continuous thread to its logical conclusion. I'm hoping they're going to be able to do better than that. I'm hoping that they treat this as they once did. I wish that they were just a professional counsel like Sam Dash, someone there for the committee doing that work. It's not.
As I recall,
it's one of the things I'll really be looking at. How did they organize themselves? How did they treat this? How did the committee itself treat this opportunity?
As I recall, and AG, you may remember this better than I do, didn't the Republicans for the Kavanaugh hearings bring in that woman who was an attorney who was going to, and then like after lunch break, they'd just given up. They couldn't stand it anymore.
No, although also, I'm not sure that was it. Also, they wanted her just to go after Dr. Blasey Ford, and then when he came in, they wanted it to go all Wild West. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure she was ever going to stay for the second part of that.
Well, she was sitting there anyway. AG, what about this? They're saying no grandstanding, right? That's sort of the report coming back from them, that they're going to have discipline and they're going to ask some of those questions in a pretty lead and spare way. Do you believe that?
No, I don't. I'm with the other panelists here on this because I really wish they would have brought in one or two experts to ask these questions. Like they did in the Kavanaugh hearings, but I think it's sad that that was one of the whole reasons they had to push the hearing back another week anyway, is because more of the freshman committee members were coming in saying, "I want my 5 minutes," and Mueller, in order to get more time, required it to be the week later. And we have to remember, Mueller's not a friendly, voluntary, I love this idea guy coming into this testimony. He had to be subpoenaed. I wouldn't call him a hostile witness, but it's certainly not a friendly subpoena in this scenario. He doesn't want to be there, and he doesn't want to politicize any of this. That's, I think, his number one goal going into this, at least from talking to people who are close to him, like Andrew McCabe. I think he once described testifying to Congress as trying to survive a nuclear fallout, just limit your exposure and get out alive. And so I really honestly think that this 5-minute round robin thing, especially like you were talking about in the Kavanaugh hearings, where it didn't even seem like they had a meeting to discuss who was going to ask what or how to respond to the Republicans, is just a bad idea, especially for something of this, with this much importance and so much riding on it, because this could determine whether or not Nancy Pelosi decides to open an impeachment inquiry, which I personally think she should have done months ago. But I think it's far too important to put in the hands of our representatives at this point.
All right, we'll get back to the impeachment thing. I do want both of you to talk about that. But yeah, I think, Bill, another question here is, yes, Mueller's a reluctant witness. I think we can say that. He's not there of his own volition. And one possible way of handling him, if you're the Democrats, I like your point that the Republicans may piss him off so much that he will say things that he didn't intend to say. But the Democrats, one way that they can deal with this is to make the questions pretty friendly. Just get him to restate basically things that are in that report. But, we're already seeing signs from Adam Schiff, the Intelligence Committee chairman, saying, well, they may not honor that. Schiff says Mueller has made it clear he doesn't want to go beyond the report. And I want to make it clear that is a choice Bob Mueller is making. That is not required by law. It's not required by regulation. That is a choice. And he also indicated the Democrats could press Mueller to ask certain questions that he might not want to engage on, but said we will have to decide how much of our time we want to spend fighting with him to discuss things outside the report. How productive is that going to be if they fight with him about trying to get him to say something he doesn't want to say?
I've read some articles saying that, in fact, and sometimes in the past when he's been pressed, he's been a little more forthcoming. Thinking back to what AG said earlier, I would say I would open with a couple of hypothetical questions, actually, just to see if by any chance this guy's had an epiphany and come to understand that if he really believes that this is a serious a situation, a crisis in the life of this democracy, as he indicated, then he has a bigger role to play, and he's going to have to make a contribution here. I do believe that we feel like we've been living in a kind of lava lamp, and just time just is suspended constantly. I think that Wednesday we're going to find out. Within a day of this hearing, we'll know whether there's ever going to be impeachment, and the actions that he takes and the committee takes are going to matter. Just add one other quick point, and that is that all along the Democrats have both honestly but also tactically affirmed their great admiration and support for Mueller. Even leading up to this, Nadler, even Jamie Raskin, lots of people when they're on television say, we just want to give him a chance to tell a story to the American people. And the fact of the matter is there is one, the issue I spoke about earlier, two, the question of whether or not his staff really understood frankly, the campaign finance law and how culpable these people were. And then 3, his failure to interview any of the principals to the likeliest conspiracy. And there are pieces of this that the committee members, the one point I do want to hear them talking is I want them to lay down the history of Donald Trump hiring to be his campaign manager Paul Manafort, a guy whose last job was fixing an election over the internet in a foreign country in the employ of Vladimir Putin, who met many times with a Putin associate and shared polling data in swing states, who attended a meeting invited by a Russian who claimed to have purloined information from the Clinton campaign. Trump once said he could go out on Fifth Avenue and murder somebody and his supporters would be okay. He went out in the middle of Fifth Avenue and stole an election with a foreign power, and the entire country looked the other way. And I think that making sure that the collusion piece of this, not just following the obstruction trail that Mueller laid out so explicitly, but following the obvious public trail to collusion, I think is something very important. And getting him to respond to some of those questions, even if they have to put a little heat on him, is what I hope they'll do.
You know, AG, it's easy to think of the Mueller report because of the thud with which it ultimately landed, even though, as you say, only 3% of Americans read it. But there also, I don't know, there's this kind of not very carefully thought out sense that this whole thing is kind of a dud or a nothing burger. And obviously Trump has done everything he can to amplify that sentiment. It's easy to forget. He's returned a lot of indictments of a lot of people, guilty pleas, prison sentences. I mean, AG, this isn't a probe that came up empty, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Totally, and that's why it's very confusing to me when President Trump says, or Rudy Giuliani gets on TV and says something like, with regards to obstruction of justice, that you can't obstruct without an underlying crime. Well, we had, I think, over 200 felonies and 87 charges and 36 indictments, and we've already had a few people go to prison. So I'm quite confused by, when he says there's no underlying crime to obstruct justice over, and there obviously is. So,
yeah, he's just lying. That's just to clear that up for you.
Thanks. Yeah, he kind of does that every once in a while, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's just lying.
Okay, so let's get. I'll stay with you, AG. Let's get to the impeachment part of this. I mean, we saw the vote the other day. 95 votes, a lot, but not enough. Roughly 40% of the Democratic caucus. It's hard for me to see how this could turn a corner and become a different thing. I don't follow this as closely as you and Bill do, but how do we get from where we are right now to any kind of actual viable move towards impeachment?
Well, I think the American people need to understand that opening an impeachment inquiry is not the same as doling out articles of impeachment. It's just opening an investigation, and because it's a judicial proceeding, and because it basically turns the House into a grand jury, you're going to be able to get the materials and evidence, and your subpoenas are going to have more teeth, and it's going to be moved through the courts a lot faster than it is with just these basic investigations that they're doing. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know more about this, but the Watergate, I think only 16% of the American public were for impeachment when they opened the impeachment hearings. And then by the end, of course, we know what happened. But I think that the idea of an impeachment inquiry is to get the American public, investigate, and that's what gets the American public behind impeachment. And I think maybe they're waiting until at least half of Americans think that impeachment is a good idea. But yeah, I'm with you that I think if it doesn't happen after this, we'll know very shortly. I think the only other thing that could cause an impeachment hearing or might even move the Republicans in the Senate even a notch or two on the needle is if Trump or the Trump administration defies a Supreme Court order, such as the subpoenas for his tax returns or his financial documents from his tax accounting firm Mazars, or if Kellyanne Conway for some reason refuses to testify under court order and the White House refuses that. I think defying a Supreme Court order, which he almost did with that 2020 citizenship census question, could be a turning point, but if that doesn't do it, I don't think anything will.
I think there's two points here that are really important. I hope that Pelosi thinks about them. One of which is that when she says that she would like to see him go to jail later on, as if she's certain that even a President Biden wouldn't come in and just in a Obama kind of way say that for the sake of bipartisanship, we're going to put all this to bed and just move on, let alone a reelected Trump. She's just kicking the can down the road to somebody else the way Mueller kicked it down to her. And the United States has developed a very bad habit in this century in particular. We're lied into the Iraq War, and and President Obama decides we're not even going to investigate. We're not going to find out whether, in fact, people were subverting and distorting intelligence to the Congress to get the authority. The British have a Chilcot inquiry, if you may recall, in which, by the way, every person subpoenaed had to come and testify. All the testimony was in public, and the report was submitted not to employees or the people under suspicion, but to the people of the United Kingdom. Compare that to any process here. After the 2008 meltdown, we didn't prosecute one Wall Street executive. Okay, the Europeans, who played only a secondary role, sent 47 of them to jail. They investigated the European Commission, the UK. They cleaned house. As a result of Iraq never being investigated, John Bolton, one of the people who lied us into it, is now trying to lie us into another war. He's right back in power. As a result of our not looking into 2008, we have people coming in here and destroying the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and all the regulations of Dodd-Frank. This is our democracy. This is truly an assault on our democracy. That's not rhetoric. That's not hyperbole. They're coming for us. And once again, for the third great crisis of the 21st century, we're turning a blind eye. We've become a democracy that can't look itself in the eye.
You might get to be a guest on Mueller. She wrote it this way.
Yeah. And so she has to understand here that one, we need this record, and she's the last chance to get it. The second thing is that this is not a look back at some failed Whitewater real estate deal. This crime is ongoing. He's in the midst of rigging the next election and inviting Putin, laughing with Putin at the law, and inviting all manner of countries to come in and obstructing efforts to secure our system. And so we can't afford to wait. This is our last chance to secure the next election. And so I think that they should look at all the risks of inaction as seriously as they look at the risks of inaction. But above all, they should stop thinking tactically and about what the political outcome is be. This is a moment in which you do your duty.
Okay, let me just be the craven. I'm going to do this for devil's advocate purposes, but let me be the craven political calculator and say, well, gee, AG, I mean, the latest poll I saw.
Talk about typecasting.
Exactly. Yeah. I was born for this role.
Yes, you all over.
So the latest poll, everybody's seen this poll. 21% of Americans, according to this one poll, support impeachment. 38% of Democrats support it. I mean, the only thing that's more terrifying than the implications of the soliloquy that Bill just did is the notion that somehow or other you come at the king, you miss, it strengthens his hand, he wins another election. So AG, I think you and Bill are pretty close to on the same page about this, but so rebut that notion. That's what Pelosi's thinking, right? This is one she would love to win but can't afford to lose, and she's not willing to try. Why is that a bad calculation?
Well, because she's betting our core values of our democracy against something that she has no proof of happening at all. She's saying, I'm not going to do my duty under the Constitution or hold a lawless president accountable as is my duty. I'm going to not do that because I think maybe something might happen poorly. And there's no proof of that, first of all. He's already running on impeachment. He's already saying we failed to impeach him. If he's going to run on us failing to impeach him, let's actually fail to impeach him and at least get the hearings out there so that we can get the evidence we need. I think we have a better shot. And there's, a lot of people will say, oh, back in the day when they impeached Clinton, they got their butts handed to him in the election. And that's not really true at all if you actually look at the individual races and what happened. And I'm pretty sure a Republican won that next election, in quotes. But she's betting the integrity of our democracy and the requirement for us to hold people accountable and that no one is above the law on a hypothetical. And it drives me crazy.
One thing that we've kind of alluded to, but maybe we should say something about it in general, Bill, is that every time they get their turn, the Republicans on both of these committees it's weird because Mueller is going into two different kinds of hostile situations. He's got Democrats who basically think that he didn't do the job, or he didn't make it clear enough, or he didn't deliver what they needed. And then he's got a bunch of Republicans who just want to tear him apart and claim that this whole thing is politically motivated, that this whole thing goes back to Hillary Clinton in some way. I mean, all kinds of things are going to be alleged.
Democrats may feel that. They don't say it much, but
I mean, I think Mueller feels as though he's facing a bunch of Democrats who are unhappy with his performance.
He probably feels that way.
And a bunch of Republicans who are going to tear him apart. Maybe we can just say a little bit about what could be expected from that Republican theater.
Well, their entire shtick to date has been that all of this was a partisan ambush, and the Attorney General of the United States is currently conducting investigations absent any indication that there's any truth to it whatsoever. I can only assume that it really burns Mueller, and so I expect that some of the Republicans at least will continue in this vein, trying to going after how many Democrats worked, going after how big a role the Steele dossier played, all these ancient questions that have all been debunked by anybody who has more than just Fox News as a source of information. And so, one of the best prospects is that, my hope is that the Republicans overplay their hand. My fear is that the Democrats will underplay theirs. I want the Democrats to put a little more heat on them. I want them. This is a president. If you step back just for a second, if you take all the impeachments, the 3 impeachments in our history, Donald Trump's crimes amount to something far greater than Nixon, Clinton, and Andrew Johnson combined. And the question is whether we're going to act now.
AG, one thing I wanted to circle, you may have some things you want to say about what the Republicans may or may not do, but and if so, feel free. But also, there's one group of people that it seems to me Mueller might feel a little bit more answerable to than anybody else that we've alluded to, and that's his staff on this inquiry. I mean, he asked a whole bunch of people, AG, to give up 2 years of their life and to pursue a certain kind of thing. And the first thing that they saw happen was Attorney General Barr come out and completely mischaracterize the results of that effort. And they may feel even now that mischaracterization holds sway more than any rebuttal has, more than the truth has. And those are people that Mueller he kind of has to take their calls, right? He can't hang up on those people. He asked them to do this job. And if they feel as though the job didn't get done right, he might feel as though he owed them a little something on Wednesday.
Yeah, and not only that, I still can't figure out why Nadler or Schiff hasn't called any of Mueller's staffers to testify either. I don't understand that. Maybe you can speak to that, but yeah, you're exactly right. And then along the lines of what the Republicans are going to do, I think you're correct. I think they're just going to try to get at that Steele dossier and the FISA court, or the FISC and the FISA warrants and the oranges of the investigation, as it were, to quote our president. But yeah, as far as that goes, I just agree with your sentiment.
Yeah. All right. So it's maybe time to wrap up. I should tell you that our final segment today, we're actually going to talk to one of the many drinking establishments that's going to open early in Washington on Wednesday and perhaps offer special drinks. You get like a Russian interference, which is vodka and I don't know what. Maybe that's what it is, with vodka and I don't know what. But so I guess I'll sort of ask both of you to sort of give your best guess. I mean, where are we Thursday, Friday, heading into the weekend, Bill? Assuming that, there aren't incredible bombshells, that there isn't some way in which Mueller violates all of our expectations of him, but that he effectively restates his premises, and he effectively restates his essential complaint about obstruction of justice. I don't know. Are we still basically, is the week going to end the way it began?
I think there are two possibilities, one of which is that there are three possibilities. One, Mueller has had somewhat of an epiphany and comes in a somewhat more forthcoming and cooperative way than everyone anticipates. I'm not predicting it, but there's always, where there's life, there's hope. Secondly, the Democrats focus on what was the weaknesses of this report. They don't just ask him to rehearse all the statements he's made within the report, but they go after the questions of, and I'd love to hear from the staff on this someday, where he got the idea that he can't identify the crimes, how he ended up not interviewing Don Jr., giving Trump all the questions in advance and getting nothing but lies from Manafort, and then why he flinched on the obvious campaign finance violations at the core of the conspiracy. I'd like them to put that on the table if they can, and if neither of those, if there's no epiphany, and the Democrats don't get a little bit tough in that way, I think he goes home without adding much. And I do think this is the end of the impeachment discussion. I've written 2 columns, long columns, about why we should do it. I won't bother to write a third.
All right, AG, yeah. Final prediction? What kind of podcast are you going to be doing when this is all over?
Well, we'll obviously go over what he says. I think we might see a small bump in the support for impeachment, but I don't think it's going to move the needle too much. Like you were talking about, I think it's for the Republicans to lose and not for the Dems to win, quote unquote. But I do hope Mueller just can't with folks like Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz and Louis Gohmert. And you're right, maybe push him into something where he has this epiphany. It's a hope, though. That's a super optimistic hope. But what I think the whole purpose of this is for on Thursday and Friday for the news networks to just play clips of the highlights of Mueller speaking in defense of his report and in opposition to what the Attorney General and the President have been saying, and just play those on a loop over and over again and let the American public hear it.
All right. We're going to have to wrap up this part of the conversation. And thanks once again to AG from Mueller, She Wrote. Check out Mueller, She Wrote. It's a terrific podcast. Doesn't just cover the Mueller stuff. It's the whole waterfront. Everything you want to hear some funny and interesting people talking about. I also want to thank, because I forgot to pre-record the credits, or I forgot to write the credits for Wolfie to pre-record them. Senior producer Betsy Kaplan for pulling the show together today. Wolfie's on the board. Carolyn McCusker, our great intern, is on phones right now. We're going to take a break. We thought we should end on a somewhat happier note. And if not a happier note, at least something that could dull your pain, which, in the case of us Irish Americans, is usually alcohol.
Robert Mueller, we're not waiting for you.
All right, we're back. Bill Curry is still in the studio with us. He's writing columns for Salon.com these days about this kind of situation. Now joining us, because if you're in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, it's not a day like any other day. It's a day when people are going to be riveted to the television, starting at 8:30 in the morning when Robert Mueller's testimony begins. We go now to Casey Callister, co-owner of Duffy's Irish Pub in Washington, D.C. So I take it, Casey Callister, that you are opening a little earlier than usual on Wednesday?
Yeah, absolutely. We can start serving alcohol at 8 a.m., and we'll be packed.
Thank the Lord.
Yes. So give us a sense. What do you have planned there? What kind of scene are you creating there?
So it's basically like any sports watching scene. We have 8 large flat screen TVs, surround sound, what I call stadium sound that we play for the NFL games. We're serving some brunch items like Irish breakfast burritos. We'll have our Bloody Mueller cocktails and probably some eye openers for everybody. Okay.
So is a Bloody Mueller just a Bloody Mary, or is there some special?
It's going to be a Bloody Mary with a little Mueller flag in it.
And so, when you do something like this, I'm assuming you're also expecting people to arrive. We should have kept AG, because AG has all this Mueller paraphernalia and tank tops and Mueller rosaries and stuff like that that's been sent to her over time. But I'm assuming you're expecting people to dress creatively.
Yes, absolutely. For, the Comey hearing, or there was a young lady that wore a Comey is my homie shirt. We had some folks wear politically agenda shirts like Abort Mike Pence at the last Cohen hearing. So we expect people to show up and maybe they're promoting their own political agenda, or maybe they're just wearing a funny shirt, but they usually get into theme.
If this were the women's soccer final, you'd know who everybody was rooting for who came in. Do you have a sense of what this crowd will be like? What are you anticipating?
I think pub's always a place where you can come and you can be on both sides of the issues. You can root for either team. Certainly,
Is it an Irish pub?
It's an Irish pub. Yeah.
Wow, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I follow your line of reasoning here, but go ahead.
We usually get a mix of people, but it's all in good fun.
And so, do you have other specialty drinks planned besides a Bloody Mueller?
Not for this one. In the past, we've done like the Covfefe cocktail, and we had the Flipper cocktail for the Cohen hearing.
Yeah.
How about an Orange Russian?
Yeah,
just
an
idea.
He said it was right there.
Oh, did yeah? Did I steal that? Oh no.
So, are you expecting? I mean, based on your experience with Comey testimony or anything else that you've done, are you expecting a packed house then?
Yeah, usually every seat will be full, standing room only. We do usually get a lot of press. I'm not sure if it's just a great excuse for them to drink on duty or not, but they're always here too.
Yes, that's the answer.
No, we have to go on the air.
We usually have some live bloggers here as well as international television. I usually end up doing about a bunch of TV interviews.
Let me just ask you this. Is it customary for a pub or a drinking establishment to be able to open that early? I mean, we're from Connecticut, so it's a much more circumscribed and quiet way of life. But do you have like a special license or something?
They have different classes of license. In D.C., we have a tavern license, and we have approval to open at 8 a.m.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess one of the things that one might hope for in the spirit of a place where everybody knows your name or whatever is that maybe this might be the one occasion where, to Bill's point, where people who don't agree would be able to at least, have a couple of drinks and talk to one another, and people who don't talk to one another ordinarily might be sitting side by side. And I guess if they follow the rules of your establishment, maybe the conversation will be a little bit more temperate, even while they're committing acts of intemperance.
Yeah, the good part is that we have an upgraded sound system. A couple hearings back, we didn't have the new sound system, so everyone was shushing each other while they were talking, because they wanted to hear the testimony. Now you can actually have a light conversation, and probably you're not going to bug anybody in the room because we have the new sound system.
All right. So Casey Callister is the co-owner of Duffy's Irish Pub in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for thinking of us. And everyone roams through D.C. from time to time, so please stop by Duffy's Irish Pub.
All right. Good luck in your big day. So tomorrow, just so you know, if you're listening here on Monday anyway, tomorrow we have meetings tomorrow. We're going to rerun one of my favorite shows, and it maybe is a good distraction also from the agonies of this time. It's a show about the sport of ultimate Frisbee. And what makes this a great show for me is it is one of the great passions for my writing colleague and frenemy, Danny Haar. Danny Haar he just loves ultimate Frisbee. So he's one of the key guests on the show. This is a show that we did about a year or so ago.
That is so Danny.
It is so Danny, right? So if nothing else, I got to make fun of him for an entire 49 minutes, although that's often the format of the Wheelhouse too. So we won't be able to do the Wheelhouse on Wednesday because of the Mueller testimony, and we're going to be live taping a really interesting show for you at 1 o'clock that day that you'll hear the following week. So we've got all kinds of surprises coming up as the week goes along here. Please stay with us, and thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for spending time with us, and thanks to Bill Curry for coming in here and joining AG from Mueller, She Wrote. We will be back. I guess you probably won't hear me live until Thursday.